Jacob wrestled with God until dawn, and won. He walked away from that fight with a limp that never healed. Hezekiah prayed not to die, and God gave him 15 more years. In those 15 years he made decisions that sent his descendants into Babylonian captivity. Paul asked 3 times for his thorn to be removed, and God said no. All 3 men received an answer. Not one of them received what they asked for. You have been treating unanswered prayer as evidence that God was not listening. But the 3 men in this video were heard immediately. What they received was not silence. It was something more difficult than silence. It was an answer that looked nothing like the request. And the gap between what they asked for and what they received changed the entire trajectory of each of their lives, in ways they could not have anticipated when they were praying. Read that again. Part 1. Jacob asked to be released, and held on tighter. Genesis 32 verses 24 to 26. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Jacob was losing. The hip was dislocated. The fight was over by any physical measure. And instead of releasing his grip, he tightened it. He did not ask to win the fight. He asked for a blessing he believed only this encounter could produce. But here is what nobody told you. The Hebrew word for wrestled is yavek, from the root of ak, meaning to cling, to embrace, to hold. This was not a combat metaphor alone. It was the language of desperate attachment. Jacob was not fighting to defeat God. He was fighting to not let go of the only encounter that could change what he had been carrying his entire life. The guilt of the stolen blessing, the fear of Esau's army waiting for him the next morning, the identity of a man who had built his entire life on obtaining what he was not given. The limp was not punishment. The limp was the permanent mark of a man who refused to walk away from God until God changed what needed to change. Think about that for a second. You have been asking God to release you from the struggle. Jacob's story says the struggle is where the blessing lives. The hip did not dislocate before the blessing came. It dislocated as the condition of receiving it. What if the difficulty you are in right now is not evidence that the encounter is ending, but evidence that you are close enough to hold on? Part 2. Hezekiah asked to live, and God said yes. Then things got complicated. 2 Kings 20 verses 1 to 6. Hezekiah became ill and was at the point of death. The prophet Isaiah said, "This is what the Lord says. Put your house in order, because you are going to die." Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed. He wept bitterly. Before Isaiah had left the middle court, the word of the Lord came to him. "Go back and tell Hezekiah, I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will heal you. I will add 15 years to your life. Now stop." Many of you will push back on this. Good. Because this is where the story becomes genuinely dangerous. God reversed his own decree. He heard the tears, honored the prayer, and gave Hezekiah 15 years. And 2 Kings 20 verses 12 to 13 records what Hezekiah did in those 15 years. He received the Babylonian envoys, showed them all his treasury, all his silver, all his gold, all his armory, everything in his storehouses. There was nothing in his palace that Hezekiah did not show them. Isaiah's response was a prophecy that everything Hezekiah showed the Babylonians would eventually be carried to Babylon. And his own descendants would serve as eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Let that land. The 15 extra years God gave Hezekiah in response to his tears produced the conditions for Israel's Babylonian captivity. The answered prayer cost more than the original decree would have. This is the moral dilemma at the center of Hezekiah's story, and the one nobody preaches. Was God wrong to answer? Was Hezekiah wrong to ask? Tell me in the comments. If you knew the 15 years would produce that outcome, would you still have prayed for them? Part Part 3. Paul asked 3 times, and God answered with something better than removal. 2 Corinthians 12 verses 7-9. There was given me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan, to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul does not name the thorn. What he records is the request, 3 times, and the response. Not removal. Sufficiency. Not the elimination of the weakness. The perfection of power through it. Many of you will push back on this. Good. Because God's answer to Paul's thorn is the most misquoted passage in the New Testament. My grace is sufficient for you is not a consolation prize. The Greek word for sufficient is archei, from archeo, meaning to be enough, to reach as far as needed. It is present tense and active. God did not say my grace was sufficient when you needed it, or will be sufficient eventually. He said it is, right now, reaching exactly as far as the thorn reaches. The thorn was not removed because the grace was calibrated to match it exactly. Type Amen if you are claiming this, that the thing God has not removed is matched exactly by a grace you have not yet fully drawn on. Part 4. What all 3 answers had in common. Jacob asked to be released and received a blessing he could not have gotten without the struggle. Hezekiah asked to live and received years that came at a cost he could not see from where he was praying. Paul asked for removal and received a grace that could only be demonstrated through the presence of what he wanted gone. In every case, God answered. In every case, the answer exceeded what the request could have produced on its own terms. Now stop. Here is what none of them understood while they were praying. Jacob did not know the limp would mark him for the rest of his life as the man who wrestled with God. Hezekiah did not know what the 15 years would cost. Paul did not know that his thorn would produce the most theologically significant verse on grace in all of his letters. Each of them experienced the answer as less than they asked for. Each of them was receiving more than they understood. Part 5. The prayer God answers is not always the one you are praying. What Jacob was actually praying, beneath the words, was change me. He had been a deceiver his entire life, and the deceit had caught up with him. The blessing was the answer to that deeper prayer. What Hezekiah was praying, beneath the tears, was let me matter. The 15 years answered that. The cost of maturing on those terms was something only history could reveal. What Paul was praying, beneath the 3 requests, was let me be free to serve you without this limitation. The answer was, your limitation is the mechanism of the service. Here is what you may be praying beneath the words you are saying. And the answer that is coming may be addressed not to the words, but to the prayer underneath them. If you want to understand what it looks like when God positions you through the very thing you are trying to escape, watch the video on screen now. A man spent 2 years being forgotten in a prison. The forgetting was the positioning. Drop "I received this" in the comments if you are choosing today to trust the answer you received over the prayer you prayed.